Life and death are things no one can predict, and sometimes death comes so suddenly that no one sees it coming. Hollywood, with all its glitz and glamour, is not immune to heartbreaking tragedies. Some stars have passed away right on live television in front of more than 12 million viewers, while others lost their lives along with two child actors in a haunting scene. And there are even those who died under bizarre circumstances that remain unexplained, as if pulled into mysterious forces that science still cannot unravel. These unexpected deaths not only left fans in shock but also raised profound questions about the fragility of life, even for the biggest names in the film industry. Right now, let's take a look at the list of 20 actors who passed away right on set, while the cameras were still rolling along with the heartbreaking tragedies and eerie stories that remain unsolved.
Part 1. Terry Thomas, the tragedy of elegance. His signature gap-toothed smile once had British audiences roaring with laughter on the silver screen. That was the first impression, and also the most unforgettable image when people think of Terry Thomas. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, he almost completely dominated roles as villains, yet with an irresistible charm and sophistication. His flourishing career, spanning from Europe to the cinematic capital of Hollywood, brought him enormous paychecks, luxurious sports cars, and a lavish life that many could only dream of. But every glory eventually fades. The tragedy struck in 1971 when he received a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. The cruel illness began to consume him from within. At first, it was only slight tremors in his hands, then gradually his steps became unsteady, and his sharpest weapon, his elegant delivery, became distorted and difficult. Directors began to avoid him, roles dried up, and the stage lights faded for the man who had once been the soul of every film. The mounting medical costs began draining his final coins. Treatment bills reaching up to £40,000 per year mercilessly devoured the entire fortune he had spent a lifetime building. By the late 1980s, unable to remain in expensive neighborhoods, he had to move into a tiny charitable apartment in Spain, before returning to Surrey to survive on assistance from the Actors Benevolent Fund. He once made the whole world laugh, and now he is crying in the dark, a former friend sorrowfully shared. Unable to bear watching a once great legend fade away, close friends and fellow actors such as Jack Douglas and Richard Briers organized a special gala night at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane. The event, featuring renowned singer Phil Collins, raised over £75,000, helping move Terry Thomas into Busbridge Hall Nursing Home. In his final years, he lay motionless in bed, having completely lost the ability to communicate, with only his devoted wife by his side day and night. He breathed his last in 1990 in a modest room, leaving the world with almost nothing to his name. From a magnificent mansion to a quiet nursing home room, Terry Thomas's tragedy remains a painful scar of Hollywood. Yet the next story, about a man once familiar to millions of British households, carries an even darker tone, rooted in personal mistakes. Part 2. Peter Adamson. When the lights go out, only darkness remains. On a drizzly morning in Bury, a familiar elderly man stood in a long line at the post office, documents in hand, waiting to receive unemployment benefits. People around him occasionally cast curious glances, whispering quietly, "Isn't that Len from television?" Indeed, it was Peter Adamson, once one of the most recognizable faces across the entire United Kingdom. For 22 consecutive years, Peter brought to life Len Fairclough, a rough yet honest, hard-drinking builder in the legendary television series Coronation Street. With tens of millions of viewers each week, the role provided him with a stable income and immense fame. People loved Len, and naturally they adored Peter as well. Yet the boundary between real life and a role can sometimes be dangerously thin. It was a downward spiral beyond redemption. His career collapsed when a shocking personal scandal erupted in 1983. Although the court later declared him not guilty, his public image was completely destroyed. In a desperate attempt to make money, he committed another fatal mistake, personally selling sensational, scandalous stories about his private life and defaming colleagues to tabloid newspapers. This serious breach of contract led to his immediate dismissal. Peter was forced to leave Coronation Street, the very show that had defined his name for over 2 decades. Prolonged lawsuits and the media's abandonment drained both his reputation and finances. Losing his primary source of income, he rushed into business ventures in a desperate attempt to recover, but failed repeatedly. Debts piled up like a mountain, and inevitably, he declared bankruptcy in 1991. In despair, Peter packed his belongings and moved to Canada, hoping for a fresh start in a place where no one knew who he was. But reality proved too harsh. He quickly failed and had to return to England, retreating into a cheap and dilapidated rented apartment. In his final years, the once sought-after actor became a recluse, completely isolated from society. He sought escape in alcohol, drinking more and more while surviving solely on meager social benefits. In 2002, Peter Adamson died of stomach cancer at the age of 72. He passed away quietly, still officially a welfare recipient, leaving behind no valuable assets for his family. The downfall of Peter Adamson stemmed from scandal and controversy. Yet there are those who dedicate their entire lives tirelessly, free from any disgrace, and still depart this world empty-handed, just like the astonishing case that follows. Part 3. Warren Clarke, the mystery behind an empty estate. When Warren Clarke closed his eyes in 2014 after a sudden and rapidly progressing illness, the entire estate he left behind amounted to only £13,056. And how bitter it was that, after the lawyers settled all outstanding debts, that figure officially dropped to a perfect zero. The event sent shockwaves through the media and among loyal fans of British cinema. Warren Clarke was no minor actor. With more than 40 years of tireless dedication to the craft, he was an unmistakably familiar face on British screens. From a classic supporting role, the thug Alex in Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece A Clockwork Orange, to the gruff yet sharp detective DL in the hit television series DL and Pasco, Warren proved his exceptional talent time and again. He worked almost without rest. He was never entangled in scandals that filled newspapers, nor was he seen throwing money away on extravagant pleasures or endless parties. Money simply vanished, quietly yet mercilessly. No one truly understood how an actor with such a steady and prolific presence could end up destitute. His income slipped through his fingers into unnamed expenses, failed investments, or perhaps the harsh cost of maintaining the image of a star. The tragedy reached its peak in his final days, when his devoted wife had to swallow her tears and remove her engagement ring to sell it. It was the only way she could manage the mounting medical bills and living expenses. Warren's final years passed in a haunting silence. With no more offers from major productions, he could only take on small, occasional jobs to get by. His passing sounded a warning about the darker side of the acting profession. Even a seasoned artist who dedicated his entire life could still leave this world with nothing. The financial ruin of Warren Clarke carries many mysteries shaped by circumstance. But in the next figure, the cause of collapse becomes painfully clear through devastating illness that destroyed an entire fortune. Part 4. James Robertson Justice, the loneliness of a fallen titan. The deep, thunderous voice of Sir Lancelot Spratt in the Doctor in the House series once captivated generations of television audiences, commanding both admiration and awe. That authoritative presence was no accident. James Robertson Justice was born into a remarkably affluent family. From that privileged beginning, He built the image of a doctor who, though strict and intimidating, carried a strangely charming and humorous edge. People always saw in him the image of a noble gentleman, passionate about motor racing, falconry, and living in grand estates. But life is not a script written with a guaranteed happy ending. And then, everything collapsed in an instant. A series of brutal strokes struck without warning. Illness ravaged his towering body, stole his thunderous voice, and forced him away from film sets forever. Unable to continue acting, his income was completely cut off, while medical expenses and the cost of maintaining his former lifestyle remained overwhelming. It did not take long for his enormous fortune to disappear. In 1970, he was forced to stand in court and declare bankruptcy, officially losing everything he had once been proud to own. His brightest years faded like a distant dream. In the final chapter of his life, James retreated to live alone in a cramped, damp cottage in Hampshire. His body grew increasingly frail and weakened, especially after enduring yet another devastating stroke in 1972. The once great man could no longer care for himself. He was found to have passed away in his bed in 1975 at the age of 68, surrounded by extreme poverty and profound loneliness. According to his final wishes, his ashes were taken and buried in a wind-swept marsh in northern Scotland, near the foundation of a former home that had once belonged to him, a place that held the memories of a golden era now reduced to dust. Illness is truly an unforgiving enemy to anyone, no matter how high they once stood. And in the next chapter, we step into the story of another icon who lost everything in a way no less bitter. Part 5. Peter Wyngarde, from the pinnacle of style to utter isolation. The man once voted Best Dressed Actor in Britain in 1970, always appearing with impeccable elegance, a signature mustache, and an air of irresistible mystery. That was Peter Wyngarde, a true fashion and pop culture icon of the 1970s. Wearing flamboyant suits and open-chested shirts as the detective Jason King in the series Department S, and its spin-off bearing his character's name, Peter captivated millions of female viewers. He lived like a true aristocrat, surrounded by lavish parties, expensive cars, and endless praise across the media. Yet behind that flawless exterior lay an enormous ego and dangerously hidden flaws. His arrogance made him difficult to work with on set, but the fatal blow came from a secret he had concealed his entire life. In 1975, a scandal erupted across newspapers. Peter was arrested and convicted for gross indecency following a homosexual encounter in a public restroom in Gloucester. For the public at the time, the news was shocking beyond belief. The image of the charming, irresistible, and perfect gentleman he had carefully constructed collapsed overnight. All illusions shattered. Broadcasters turned their backs, lucrative contracts were mercilessly canceled, and roles slowly slipped out of his reach, leaving behind a vast void in both fame and income. In 1982, the man who had once symbolized wealth and style officially declared bankruptcy. No longer earning enormous fees, he struggled to survive on government social assistance. In his later years, Peter withdrew completely from the spotlight, living an isolated life in a small apartment in Chelsea. Occasionally, he would appear at minor science fiction fan events, signing autographs, just to earn a little money for daily expenses. His hair had turned completely white, and the once fashionable clothes still clung to him like a desperate attempt to hold on to a golden past, while his health and finances had long since been depleted. Peter Wyngarde passed away in 2018 at a hospital in London at around 90 years old. The once dashing gentleman left quietly, with a financial legacy that was nearly non-existent. The fall of a fashion icon is deeply tragic, yet the next story brings an even darker haunting, when a masculine star destroyed his own life with alcohol. Part 6. Ian Hendry, when alcohol consumes an entire career. A masculine star with striking charm who dominated the small screen in The Avengers during the 1960s. A man who once made countless women's hearts flutter. Ian Hendry entered the entertainment world with a natural charisma, shining from his very first days as Dr. David Keel. He was predicted to become one of Britain's greatest film actors, with a future paved in glory and enormous paychecks. But Ian's real life was a dark script, completely unlike the charming roles he played on television. The pressures of fame and fractures in his personal life drove him into the grip of alcohol and substances. A series of failed marriages and countless drunken nights gradually eroded both his health and the fortune he had worked so hard to build. From an A-list star, he turned himself into an uncontrollable alcoholic. By the late 1970s, Ian Hendry had completely collapsed. Debts piled up like a mountain, forcing him to file for bankruptcy. His deteriorating health ravaged his once handsome face, making directors hesitant to cast him. His only way out was to accept minor, forgettable roles in low-budget television soap operas or perform on provincial stages, merely to earn enough money for alcohol. The last time the public saw him on television was in 1984, when he appeared as a guest on This Is Your Life. Audiences were shocked to witness an aged, frail Ian Hendry, his hands trembling, his gaze vacant and heartbreaking. Alcohol had stripped away every trace of vitality. The tragedy came to an end on Christmas night in 1984, when Ian died of internal bleeding at just 53 years old. He passed away in solitude, leaving behind a broken body and an empty wallet. Alcohol had destroyed Ian Hendry from within. Yet in the next case, it is a life of extravagance and reckless gambling that ultimately decides the fate of a gentleman. Part 7. Wilfred Hyde White, a sentence written by extravagance.
Breaking news. John Ritter. America's top sitcom star has died on set. The headline flashed across CNN and the Los Angeles Times on September 11, 2003, leaving the nation in shock. That afternoon in Burbank, California, John Ritter was still delivering witty lines, making the crew burst into laughter. But during the next scene of 8 Simple Rules, he suddenly clutched his chest, his face drained of color. Some thought he was pulling another prank, but seconds later he collapsed in front of dozens of stunned colleagues. The joyful set turned to panic. An ambulance rushed him to Providence St. Joseph Medical Center, ironically just blocks away. Doctors worked tirelessly for hours, but in vain. The official diagnosis, aortic dissection, a rare and nearly fatal condition if not caught early. Shockingly, medical records later revealed Ritter had shown warning signs for years, but had been overlooked.
All his assets were seized, and his aristocratic privileges vanished into nothingness. In his final years, the man once accustomed to servants and luxury found refuge in the Motion Picture Country Home, a modest retirement facility for former entertainment industry figures in California. The bitter contrast between his elegant, wealthy screen persona and his lonely, financially strained reality became a lasting ache for those who once admired him. He gambled his entire life, and in the end, the house always wins, a friend once remarked with sorrow. Wilfred passed away in 1991, and the small remainder of his estate was nowhere near enough to compensate even a fraction of his years of reckless indulgence. Wilfred's life collapsed under the weight of enormous tax burdens, and the next story also begins with taxes, but ends with a chilling curse that came true. Part 8. Max Wall. Laughter shattered in an empty room. Famous for his bizarre movements and wild slapstick comedy, Max Wall was once an icon who brought roaring laughter across all of Britain. At the height of his career, he possessed a dream fortune, with 3 Rolls-Royce cars proudly parked outside his home and 2 grand luxurious mansions. He spent money like water, enjoying privileges reserved only for the most dazzling elite. But the personal life of the King of Comedy was a chain of tragedies. A bitter and highly publicized divorce consumed a large portion of his wealth. Shortly after, massive tax bills struck like a final merciless blow, destroying his entire financial empire. From a man sitting atop piles of gold, Max was reduced to nothing and officially declared bankrupt in 1973. The Rolls-Royces were repossessed, the mansions sold off in distress. In his later years, the once glorious star moved into a dilapidated bedsit costing just £10 a week in Blackheath, before relocating to a cramped, bleak council flat. The laughter that once filled the stage was replaced by heavy sighs within 4 silent walls. There was a razor-sharp sentence his ex-wife once threw at him during an argument. "You will die alone in an empty room." No one could have imagined that cruel curse would become a chilling prophecy. In 1990, Max Wall passed away, alone, isolated, and almost penniless, without a single coin left behind. That bitter curse closed the chapter of Max's life and opened another dark chapter for the screen legends we are about to explore. Below is the script for the next 4 parts of the video 15 Old British Actors Who Died in Poverty, continuing the engaging YouTube storytelling style that delves into hidden struggles and the harsh realities of an acting career. Part 9. Dennis Price, The Fall of an Aristocratic Heir. Born into a noble family that owned vast portions of land across parts of England, Dennis Price carried true aristocratic blood. He could have lived a peaceful, privileged life as a golden-born gentleman, but his burning passion for the stage led him to defy family expectations and pursue acting. Dennis entered the entertainment world with an unmistakable elegance. His career peaked when he brilliantly portrayed a cold, cunning serial killer with aristocratic poise in the cinematic masterpiece Kind Hearts and Coronets. The public adored him, directors sought him out, and money flowed into his pockets effortlessly. But tragedy began with the extravagant lifestyle ingrained in him since birth. Dennis spent money recklessly. He became addicted to expensive casinos, all-night parties, and never learned the word saving. When his fame slowed in the 1960s, that aristocratic lifestyle became a noose tightening around his neck. In 1967, the nobleman was declared bankrupt in court under massive, unpayable debts. Ruined and ashamed, Dennis fled the London high society scene, retreating to the distant island of Guernsey to escape taxes and creditors. In his final years, he isolated himself in a small house, numbing reality with alcohol day after day. Illness began to ravage his body without mercy. "I had everything, and I threw it all away myself," he once admitted bitterly during drunken moments. The downfall of an aristocrat left deep regret. Yet sometimes even those who brought the most laughter to others cannot smile in their final moments. Part 10. Charlie Drake, Tears Behind a Millionaire's Laughter. The phrase, "Hello, my darlings," delivered in a high-pitched, playful voice, once had Britain roaring with laughter throughout the 1950s and 1960s. That catchphrase belonged to Charlie Drake, a small man with an astonishingly explosive energy. Through his unique slapstick comedy style, fearlessly throwing himself across the stage, Charlie turned himself into a massive money-making machine. From a poor boy, he rose to become a television millionaire, living a life millions could only dream of. His earnings were beyond count. But with sudden wealth came deadly temptations. Charlie had a fatal weakness, a desire to live like a true high roller to make up for his humble beginnings. He burned through vast amounts of money on glamorous women, expensive sports cars, and especially luxury racehorses. Not stopping there, Charlie naively poured huge sums into disastrous business ventures under the influence of opportunistic friends. When the golden era of slapstick comedy gave way to new trends, his income dried up, but his spending habits did not. Tragedy struck when his health declined after serious onset accidents. Unable to perform at his peak, his income was completely cut off. In his final years, people saw an aging, ailing Charlie Drake living in a charitable actor's retirement home. When he passed away in 2006 at the age of 81, the public was shocked to learn that the comedy millionaire had left behind only £5,000, a brutally small figure, proving just how fragile fame truly is. And if Charlie Drake's laughter was drowned in unpaid bills, then the roar of the next on-screen villain would also fade away into oblivion. Part 11. Todd Slaughter. The collapse of a villain's empire. For a long time, he was hailed as the king of Victorian melodrama. With his grotesquely upturned mustache, piercing eyes, and a savage signature laugh, Todd Slaughter specialized in portraying the most brutal and bloodthirsty villains on stages big and small. He was the nightmare of children and the guilty fascination of countless British audiences of his time. At the height of his career, Todd's blood-soaked theatrical tours, such as Sweeney Todd and Jack the Ripper, were always sold out. Audiences packed theaters just to shudder at his exaggerated threats. Todd proudly built a theatrical empire of his own, living extravagantly and believing that his art would endure forever. But after World War II, public taste suddenly shifted 180 degrees. Audiences began to favor modern cinema, realistic stories, and natural acting styles. Todd Slaughter's exaggerated shouting and glaring suddenly appeared ridiculous, outdated, and out of place. The theaters began to empty. From a box office king, Todd was reduced to traveling with a suitcase, performing in shabby provincial halls for a few indifferent spectators. Revenue hit rock bottom, yet he stubbornly continued to maintain expensive theater troupes. The inevitable outcome arrived. In 1953, Todd Slaughter officially declared bankruptcy. No one wanted to hire an irritable old man performing outdated plays anymore. From the pinnacle of power, he plunged into the abyss of obscurity. Todd died in 1956 at the age of 70, shortly after a poorly attended performance in Derby. There were no mourning crowds, no grand eulogies. Once the king of villains, he departed in the cold indifference of the very public that had once worshipped him. Part 12. Adam Faith, the final gamble of an ambitious man. Adam Faith's journey was an astonishing transition from music to acting. Beginning as a pop teen idol with a youthful face and chart-topping hits, Adam refused to remain in one place. He quickly expanded into film and television, achieving equally remarkable success. Handsome, intelligent, and charismatic, Adam had everything needed to live a comfortable life until his final days. Yet, art alone never satisfied his enormous ego. Adam wanted to be respected as a true player in the financial world, a powerful businessman capable of controlling millions of pounds. He ventured into real estate, financial consulting, and asset management for other stars. At first, everything went smoothly, leading Adam to believe he was a financial genius. His arrogance drove him to place a massive bet, investing all his capital and raising millions of pounds to launch The Money Channel, a specialized financial cable television network. It was a fatal mistake, launched at the worst possible time. The dot-com bubble burst in the early 2000s, wiping out the market and draining investment capital. The channel quickly failed and shut down. A massive debt of more than £32 million crashed down on him like a tidal wave. In 2002, Adam's business empire completely collapsed, pushing a man once seen as a symbol of success into humiliating bankruptcy. Newspapers that once praised him now dissected his failure. The pressure of debt, prolonged lawsuits, and mental exhaustion drained his strength. In March 2003, just 1 year after his bankruptcy, he suffered a sudden heart attack and died in a hotel at the age of 62. He left behind a tangled financial mess, a mountain of debt his family had to bear, erasing entirely the glorious achievements of his youth. Part 13. Joan Turner, a voice lost within empty walls. The woman, once hailed by the media as the richest woman in British show business, possessed an extraordinary weapon, a soaring, crystal-clear soprano voice, perfectly blended with a natural comedic talent. Joan Turner was a unique phenomenon on variety stages during the 1960s. She could leave audiences breathless with a classical opera excerpt, then, in the next moment, make them burst into laughter with her playful, exaggerated expressions. At the peak of her career, Joan earned record-breaking fees, becoming one of the highest-paid female performers in Britain. She lived in luxury, traveled in the finest cars, and enjoyed a life that seemed to have no tomorrow. Yet behind that dazzling spotlight lay a devastating financial void. Joan had no business acumen and was far too trusting. Failed investments, collapsed ventures, and excessive spending quickly consumed her entire fortune. Unpaid bills piled up, and tax authorities tightened their grip. Before long, the queen of the stage was pushed into the abyss and officially declared bankrupt. With no money left, her so-called friends in high society quickly turned their backs, leaving her alone to face a harsh reality. In her final years, Joan Turner had to leave the bustling neighborhoods and move into a cramped, deteriorating council house. The once million-dollar voice now survived solely on modest government assistance. In 2009, Joan passed away at the age of 86. The silent, empty room marked the end of a legend in near total obscurity. No grand funeral, no farewell from the public that had once adored her. If oblivion was Joan's final sentence, then in the next story, the central figure is still struggling day after day within the swamp of his own tragedy.
14. Martha Mansfield. A costume dress turned into her coffin.
The star of Whose Line Is It Anyway once amazed all of Britain with an almost unbelievable level of improvisational brilliance. To mention Tony Slattery in the early 1990s was to speak of a tireless machine of laughter. His extraordinary intelligence, lightning-fast wit, and sharp satirical style allowed him to dominate television. Turn on any channel at any time, and you would likely see Tony's familiar face. But darkness began to grow within that very brilliant mind. The cost of fame and an insane work schedule gradually eroded his mental stability. Depression struck like an invisible storm, destroying his defenses. The psychological illness shattered his concentration, making him increasingly unstable on set. Producers grew wary, offers dwindled, and eventually disappeared entirely. His downward spiral lasted for decades, burning through the last of the money he had saved during his golden years. In 2020, British media was shocked to learn that the once iconic comedian had officially filed for bankruptcy. In his later years, instead of enjoying the fruits of a lifetime of work, Tony Slattery struggled to survive. He clung to small, fringe art projects, performing on tiny stages that could hold only a few dozen people. Yet that meager income could never keep up with the rising cost of living. Now, Tony continues to battle the demons in his mind and the daily burden of survival. "Some days, just getting out of bed is already a victory," he admitted with emotion. His tragedy stands as a powerful reminder. Sometimes, those who bring the most laughter are the ones who endure the deepest pain once the curtain falls. Tony's downfall left many with a deep sense of sorrow, but for millions of Britons, the greatest shock came from the bitter death of a beloved childhood icon.
15. Adolf Caesar, heart attack, cut down a black star on set.
The first host of Blue Peter was not just a name, but an entire sky of memories tied to generations of young British viewers. Christopher Trace appeared on screen with a warm smile, a captivating voice, and skillful hands. Millions of children grew up with him, seeing him as a familiar uncle, a trusted guide during those afternoons gathered around black and white televisions. Yet, ambition can sometimes become a poison that destroys the most peaceful things. Unwilling to remain tied to the safe image of children's programming, Christopher decided to leave Blue Peter and venture into the treacherous world of business. He believed his fame would serve as a shield, guaranteeing success wherever he went. It was a mistake that stripped him of everything. With no financial management experience, Christopher's business plans quickly collapsed under the harsh realities of the market. In 1973, the enterprise into which he had poured all his capital fell apart completely. Bankruptcy marked the full stop to both his career and the once brilliant life of a childhood idol. The children who once watched him had grown up, television introduced new faces, and Christopher Trace was swiftly pushed to the margins of public attention. His life afterward became a long, difficult, and bleak struggle in a small, dilapidated apartment. He tried to return to acting to survive, but Hollywood and major broadcasters no longer opened their doors to him. All he could secure were minor, uncredited roles and odd jobs that barely earned enough to buy food day by day. In 1992, Christopher Trace passed away after a period of battling illness. The room where he breathed his last was cold and cramped, in stark contrast to the warm and vibrant image he had once brought into millions of living rooms across Britain. From luxurious mansions to desolate rooms, these 15 stories stand as the most ruthless proof of how fragile fame truly is. Behind the radiant smiles on screen often lie tragic shadows, struggles with temptation, illness, and extreme loneliness. Thank you for watching until the end of the video. Don't forget to hit like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. See you again in the next videos.